Hello, and welcome to 5 Minute Math. Today, for our number talk, we are looking at these two mixed numbers and approximating the difference, trying to figure out if it's going to be less than 1 or greater than 1. So let's first take a look at our whole numbers here, and we should notice it's 6 and 5. So if I wanted to subtract 6 and 5, right, that's going to get me 1, which is landing right there in between that less than 1 and greater than 1. So the difference here is really going to be these two fractions, 6/7 and 9/10. So let's just really focus in on that. So if 6/7 is greater than 9/10, then we're going to end up with a little bit left over, and it's going to be a little bit greater than 1. But if 9/10 happens to be greater, right, we'd have to regroup that 6 wholes in order to make the fraction subtraction work, and it end up being less than 1. So how do we compare these fractions, 6/7 and 9/10? I really don't want to change these into common denominators of 70. We could if we wanted to. Hopefully we notice that there's a pattern here. Did you notice that if you take your numerator and you add 1, you get the denominator? So both of these fractions have that same pattern of the numerator is simply 1 less than the denominator. How does that help us? Well, let's take a look at our patterns here. So if I were to take a square, I'm going to cut it in half, and there we go. I'm going to shade one part. So that's 1/2. But watch what happens if I'm going to keep the same pattern to where my numerator is 1 less than the denominator. I'm simply going to change the denominator. So I still have one difference between my numerator and denominator, but look how much more I shaded with 3/4 than 1/2. Let's try 7/8. I think once we get that, we will have established the pattern. So there's my 8ths. Right, I'm just going to kind of do some diagonals. There's 8ths. So I'm going to shade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you notice that as my denominator grew, and as my numerator was still just 1 less than that, every time that happened, I shaded more and more, right? So this 3/4 is greater than the 1/2, but the 7/8, just by this little chunk right there, is greater than the 3/4. So if I apply that to here, I can say if I were to take this square and break it up into 10 parts and shade 9, that's going to be bigger than if I were to take a square, break it up into 7 parts, and shade 6. Because as my denominator gets bigger, if my numerator is still 1 less than that, I'm going to end up shading more and more, which means this is bigger. Which means in order for me to subtract, right, I would actually have to regroup that 6 into a 5 and rename that as an improper fraction in order to make that work, because my subtrahend here is going to be larger than my minuend, which means my answer is actually going to be less than 1.